One of the best things you can do when you're in Vienna after you've seen the main historic sites is go strolling in the little back alleys. For example, here we are in Gasse. It's a pedestrian street. There are several restaurants along it. You could stop and have a meal or have a drink, or just simply walk and see the sights.
The Viennese love to eat, and they have a wide variety of restaurants, so you don't have to spend a fortune to have a good meal. You can eat in some of these casual outdoor or indoor restaurants in a traditional tavern style of ambience, and you'll find these all over town.
Neglerstrasse is another one of those cute little streets for pedestrians only, and it has a little mysterious curve at the end of it. You wonder what shops are down there. You have to keep walking to find out.
This is just one of many charming little lanes that you'll find in the heart of Old Vienna. We're in the central part of the city. It's the area within the Ring Road, and we're just a few blocks away from the end of the Graben, which is that main town square, and we're also a few blocks away from the Hofburg Palace. So Neglergasse is very easy to find. You just walk to the end of the Graben and keep on going. And notice the little side alleys that lead off of Neglergasse, particularly this one because it leads down to an outstanding restaurant. They have outdoor seating in a beautiful garden terrace, nice trees and umbrellas, and wonderful ambiance here in the outdoor terrace. The name of the restaurant is Esterhazy Keller, and the word Keller will suggest to you that there's a cellar. Yes, there is a basement room inside the restaurant as well. You go down the staircase into a typical medieval style barrel vaulted cellar restaurant. It's the same place, Esterhazy Keller, so you can sit outdoors on the terrace or maybe downstairs in the cellar. And they have a surprising salad bar here. You'd think it's all meat and potatoes, but a nice selection of all sorts of foods here in Esterhazy Keller. And it's so convenient. You can go right to that little cafeteria-style counter and get your food. We're having some dumplings, some goulash, some soup. Austrian cuisine is a blend of Central European influences with some tastes from the Czech Republic, from Hungary, from Germany, from northern Italy, and all blended together right here in Austria.
One of the major squares in town is Am Hof, surrounded by old palaces, churches, shops, cafes. There's a big fountain and statue right in the middle of it all. Another one of the charming squares of town is Judenplatz, the Jewish place. There used to be a lot of Jews in Vienna, but unfortunately most of them were killed by the Nazis in World War II. But still today we have some Jewish neighborhoods, and this square, the Judenplatz. There's lots of this kind of ornamentation on the buildings in Vienna. Statues holding up the doorways.
Many of these grand old buildings of Vienna were built in this elaborate Baroque style, which flourished in the 1680s, 1690s, and early 1700s. It's such a delight to walk around and look at the details you'll find, the window framings, the statues up on the second floor, the beautiful columns and pillars. Here's a double-headed eagle of the Habsburgs. So much different than our modern buildings, which tend to be plain blank walls. These buildings are alive. And most of these buildings have modern interiors, which shows that this historic city is very much growing into the future. Another great thing about Vienna is pastry.
Sackertorte is one famous cake, and then Demels is the other really famous cafe. And they too have got chocolate cake, they've got all kinds of pastries, coffees, teas, other sorts of drinks, ice creams, and it's world famous, Demel. So that's a good spot to check out. And we're so close to the hotel, you'll see we're just down at the end of the mall and a right and a left to get to the hotel.
The interior dates back to 1888 when Demels first got going in this location, but they actually started 100 years earlier in 1785 in a different part of Vienna. You'll find a lot of other pastry shops around town and chocolate shops, outdoor sidewalk cafes. It's a great place for noshing. You don't have to have a meal, you can just nibble. Once you've seen the monuments and the palaces and the museums, don't think that's the end of Vienna because there's still a lot more to see. Just wandering around in these little back alleys is one of the most delightful ways to spend your time when you're here in Vienna.
Walking around in these little back alleys in Vienna, you're constantly coming across surprises like this Gothic church, the Maria Stiegenkirche. And in contrast to the modern, there's your standard sports utility vehicle right next to it.
There are several dozen beautiful fountains like this in the many little squares of Vienna. It's a city carved in bronze and stone with statues virtually everywhere.
A lot of these buildings used to be palaces back in the 19th century and as far back as the 18th century. So they were private palaces of the nobility. Vienna was a little bit unusual in terms of European cities in that most of the nobility and all of their aristocratic friends and colleagues lived in the central part of the city throughout the 1,000 years that Vienna was an imperial power. Unlike a lot of other cities, the nobility would be spread all over the place, outside town in their country palaces and whatnot. Here they all lived right in town, and what you see around you is that kind of a royal neighborhood that has now been converted, and a lot of this is government buildings, government offices. We could do a dogleg around the front of this church if you want to take a look inside it. It's a very old Gothic church. It's just a little block out of the way. Why don't we walk through the arcade? The name of this church again is Minaretenkirche, and it's in the Gothic style. This is a real classic Gothic church. It was first built from the 14th century, and then it took them several hundred years to build and to finish and to decorate. It went through different phases during the Renaissance and the Baroque. They put in some Baroque details, and then they took them out again to restore it to its original Gothic appearance. And it's unique in being almost square. It's as wide as it is long. You have these, an aisle, a nave, and an aisle, and they're all about equal width. You don't find that very often in a Gothic church. And up on the wall here is the most spectacular single element inside the church. As you can see, it's the Last Supper. And what we have got here is a mosaic. Yeah, it's not a painting. Take a look at that. It's a mosaic made out of small colored marbles and cut stones. It's an exact copy of Leonardo's masterpiece that's in Milan, in the refectory of Milan. So this is Leonardo's Last Supper. And the story is that Napoleon, when he conquered Italy, he took a lot of plunder back to Paris. He was planning to take the Last Supper with him back to Paris. It's a fresco on a wall of a church, but nope, Napoleon was planning to carve it lock, stock, and barrel out of that church in Milan, and so therefore he had this commission to take its place, and this was to go up in Milan. Instead of any of that happening, it ended up here in Vienna. So it's a beautiful copy of Leonardo's piece. You know, the original painting has just been reopened to the public, but unfortunately it's in a real state of decay. It's really dilapidated. So what you see here is actually a better version. Let's just take a minute. You can walk all the way around this whole church and then meet outside in 2 minutes, okay?
Here we have the oldest square in Vienna, the Hoher Markt and the Anker clock. In the Middle Ages there was a market square here, and even earlier in Roman times there was an encampment that you can still see. There's an archaeological excavation open to the public. The streets around the Hoher Markt are also quite old, and there's a mix with some new shops here as well. This is a wonderful neighborhood for wandering in. We're closer to the cathedral now, back by the Dom. Around the corner is a rare sight in Vienna. It's a vegetarian restaurant. Restaurant Rink. And they have some delicious foods, which just goes to prove that Austrian cuisine is not exclusively meat. You can get some delightful salads in most of the restaurants in town. and in a very few they specialize in just vegetarian cuisine. Light and delicious and healthy too. Not terribly expensive. You can have a good meal in Vienna for about the same price that you'll pay at home. There's a lot of free entertainment out on the malls, especially on the Graben and on the Kohlmarkt. Generally after 5 p.m. is the best time to find some street musicians because they really come out in numbers at that time. So every couple hundred feet you'll run into some new and different entertainment, and it goes right on into the night. The Kohlmarkt stays quite lively right up until 11 p.m., 11:30 at night. Crowds gather around, and be sure to chip in a little offering if you're enjoying the show. A lot of outdoor eaters, especially when you're traveling in the pleasant time of the year, let's say May and June, right up through late September and into October. Those are always ideal times to be traveling. But you can come to Vienna anytime, even in the winter. It's quite enjoyable. And of course, hotel prices are a little bit lower in the winter. However, it is pretty cold then and it gets dark early, so it's always better to come in the milder half of the year. Our Hawaii Geographic Society travels to Central Europe in September generally, which is a perfect time to go. We're out for an evening's festivities, walking past the great Dome Cathedral and past a lively gelato place. We're going out to dinner to celebrate a special event. One of our group members is having his 80th birthday. So that was a good reason for us all to get together and go out to this neat restaurant. It's right next to the old Greek church, and they can easily handle our little crowd. There's about 24 of us here at dinner tonight. It seems like the eating never ends on World Traveler. We like to show you a variety of restaurants. Here's Weissappel, right near our hotel. Menu showing the typical entrees are priced at about $10. So here we have a very decent and moderately priced restaurant, typical of your neighborhood corner restaurant that you'll find scattered throughout the city. Meat and potatoes and some fried onion rings. That's a complete meal right there. Well, here's a glimpse of a few more restaurants to give you some idea of the cuisine of Vienna and the ambience and style of the eateries. There's a lot of outdoor dining in the summertime, from early May through early October. It's very pleasant to sit outside on most evenings, or of course there's always tables available inside. Some of the more popular restaurants you do want to reserve at. You can check your guidebooks for phone numbers or check with your hotel concierge and call ahead. It's always a good idea. Unless you arrive a little early, like 6 p.m. Many of our Hawaii travelers like to have a dinner at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. And usually at that hour there's no problem getting a table in a European restaurant. Europeans tend to eat rather late. Pointing out some of the interesting activities in the evening, just head on down to Kohlmarkt and Graben and just take a stroll. Particularly in the warm months, the town is alive. The restaurants outdoors are filled with people. There's lots of people out strolling. Of course, it's very safe, and you'll get some street music entertainment. You might go to the opera at night. They have a performance nearly every night of the year. 300 different operas a year performed there. The music on the streets is free, but even in the opera, it can be quite affordable if you buy a standing room ticket. They only cost about $5. The only problem is you have to stand. It's okay if you've got the energy. And you actually get a decent view looking down on the stage. But the music on the streets is free. There's all kinds of music here in Vienna. So by all means, take a stroll at night right here in the heart of town.
Just a 24 years, sunny evening, the door so yet. 24 years, we don't.
Now let's go down into the metro system and take a ride to nowhere. We're just going to show you how the metro works. You buy your ticket and you punch it as you walk through the gateway onto the train. It's a beautiful system. They've got half a dozen lines that interconnect at several points here in town, just to show you what the Vienna Metro is all about. That's the end of the evening. Next morning, breakfast at the hotel as usual. We always like to have breakfast included so we can eat together. In fact, in Vienna, you'll find, and throughout Europe, nearly all of the hotels include breakfast right in the room rates, which makes it very convenient for us.